Today we are talking about Peperomias, a plant that a lot of people label as easy, but in my experience that's not always the case. Some, like the Peperomia obtusifolia, the Peperomia ginny, the Peperomia hope, total angels. And then you have the ruffle Peperomias, the watermelon Peperomias, string of turtles Peperomia, and that's a totally different story. They're Peperomias, but they act completely different than other ones. So in this video, I'm going to break down the real Peperomia care. There are going to be details that I don't hear a lot of people talk about because these plants do not all want the same care, even though they share the same genus. All right, so the first one, Peperomia basics. Why are they so weird? Peperomia are actually semi-epiphytic succulents that grow in tropical forests. This means their stem and their leaves hold water like succulents, but their roots are tiny, delicate, and shallow. Many grow on trees rather than deep soil. They're adapted to bright shade, and I'll explain what that is, airy moisture, again I'll explain what that is, and quick drying environments. And not to mention that these plants are pet friendly and there's so many different varieties of them. They are a wonderful addition to any plant collection. Okay, so here's the root as to why some are really easy and why some are so fussy. Thick-leaved Peperomias like the obtusifolia, like Peperomia ginny, Peperomia hope, they store a lot of water in their leaves and their stems, which makes them act more like succulents. Thin leaf or textured varieties like string of turtles, watermelon, the ruffle varieties behave more like humidity-loving mini tropicals, but they still have delicate, easily overwatered roots. Understanding this solves almost every care problem. I have been eyeing a marble Peperomia obtusifolia for such a long time, and when I saw that they had them on the Wild and Sun website, who I'm partnered with in my plant care series and for this video, I was really excited, so I ordered a couple of them because they were a good deal and they're absolutely beautiful. They did great in shipping and I love them. I love the marble variegation of them, and you can actually see these are blooming, so I'll talk a little bit about the blooms as well as we go through this care video. Now, Wild and Sun doesn't just have houseplants on their website, they have a lot of beautiful outdoor varieties. They have annuals, perennials, and they've been in business for a long time. I've never had a bad experience with them. I've ordered a ton of plants for them. I've done a pollinator garden, succulent garden. I've ordered snake plants from them. I've ordered so many plants. I'm like trying to remember them all. So 10 out of 10 recommend if you're looking to ship some plants indoor or outdoor, and you can get 10% off your first order with code Ashley10. So let me know what plants you guys decide to get. And I know that they're going to be adding a lot more plants to their website, especially houseplants. So keep an eye out and I'll keep you guys updated. But I'll have a link in my description below to their website, and don't forget to use the code to get a % off if you end up getting some plants, and I guarantee you'll find some good ones on there. So when I saw these, I thought, okay, perfect opportunity to share care instructions for Peperomias because these guys are not all created equal. Forgot to mention, you're always guaranteed a good light show in these plant care videos, and that is due to the fact that there are mirrors and inflatable guys on the porch outside my plant room, and that is to keep away the pigeons. So it's very entertaining to observe while I'm here doing my plant filming. Light for these plants can be a big determining factor on their health. Low light equals weak roots, which can equal rot. One of the questions I get asked about a lot with Peperomia are the crisping leaves or the leaves becoming cupped, and a lot of that's due to lighting issues. These guys are very sensitive to light. Like, they get sunburned very easily, and they don't just get washed out sunburn, they literally crisp up. They have all sorts of issues. The leaves start to split. It can be a real problem for them, but they are not low light plants. They need some good light. So I would err on the side of bright indirect light. So bright shade is what they like in their natural habitat. What the heck is that? I'd say as long as they're getting some decent light, especially in the morning times, because that morning light isn't going to be as UV high. Avoid bright afternoon light. If you have a grow light, 10 out of 10 recommend grow lights. Don't have them directly next to the grow light or under the grow light. Have them pulled down a little bit. Go with more light first. See if it's causing a problem and then pull back, because the light in our homes is going to be a lot less usually than it is out in their natural habitats and outside. Especially here in Michigan. I can have this plant right up next to a window and the lighting's not going to be as strong as, say, you know, maybe North Carolina where I used to live, or in Florida or something like that. Just think of them as extremely, extremely pale plants that will burn at an instant notice, but they want to get some, vitamin D from the sun. Now, if your peperomia is getting really leggy, which can happen, that's an indication of needing more light. And I also recommend rotating these plants because they can get really patchy on one side and the other side. If they do get really patchy and kind of bald in areas, you can prune them. That will always encourage plants to get bushier, which is a look that a lot of us are going for. If the new leaves are looking a lot smaller than the old leaves, that's a sign of needing more light. But if you're seeing crisping, stuff like that, then maybe scale back if your plant's getting a lot of light and it's crisping up. Watering is probably the trickiest and most important part with peperomias. It's the easiest thing to get wrong, and this is because these plants are semi-succulent. So they store water in stems and leaves, but they have thin, delicate roots. This creates the perfect storm for confusion. So a general watering rule for peperomias is to let them dry out 2/3 to all the way, but depending on the variety, you'll want to be a bit more nuanced in your watering. So your thicker leaf peperomias like the obtusifolia, like the Peperomia Hope and Ginny, I'm just using those three as examples. Those are going to be more drought tolerant and they're going to be able to handle drought more easily. So those plants you want to make sure that they're almost all the way, if not fully dry, before you give them a good drink. And you can also do the leaf test or the taco test. So if the plant is hydrated, the leaves are going to be very full of water and so are the stems. So it's going to be difficult to bend the leaves without breaking them. They're going to be very full. They're not going to be wrinkly or anything like that. Once they start to get dehydrated, the leaves are going to become easily malleable, bendable. The stems are going to be a little bit thinner. The plant might be drooping a little bit. So if you're unsure as to whether or not it's time to water your plant based on the soil, you can go off of the signs that the plant is giving you. And then we have your more thin leaf variety of peperomias. Now these are going to need very different care because they're not able to store as much water in their leaves. So they're going to need more consistent watering. However, you want to be very careful not to create root rot. Now, honestly, the biggest way to prevent that is with the correct type of soil, which I'll get into. But you want to make sure that when you're watering the thin leaf varieties more regularly than you're watering your thicker succulent leaf peperomia varieties. So for the thin leaf ones, you're going to want to water when it's about halfway dry, and you're going to probably be required to be a little bit more consistent with watering. Like these guys, if you go a little bit too long without watering, it'll be fine. But those thin leaf varieties, they will start to crisp up, they'll start to drop leaves, you'll be noticing all sorts of issues with your plants. So there's a little bit of a tricky watering nuance with peperomia. Their roots tend to stay very close to the top of the soil. They have tiny, delicate root systems. So being potted up in a really big pot is going to be a total problem for peperomias. So I'm going to repot these guys up. I want to make sure that they have the best soil so that I don't have to worry about them for the next 2 to 3 years. So this actually looks great. Depending on the type of peperomia you have, the root systems are going to be different as well. So this obtusifolia actually has a really nice root system. They're still somewhat fragile, but they're not super shallow like other roots can be. So you can see here that the roots are all throughout. It looks pretty healthy, happy. I'm not going to go much bigger than this when I'm repotting it. When is the right time to repot your peperomia? One, if you see it get root bound, which isn't going to be that noticeable with peperomias because they have such small root systems, which is great because then you're not having to repot every 6 months to a year. You're probably only going to want to be repot every 2 to 3 years. But you definitely want to repot every 2 to 3 years, even if it's not extremely root bound, because your soil's just going to need that in general with all of your houseplants. Because soil itself has a lot of issues after a period of time. So they can become hydrophobic where they're not absorbing water anymore, where the water just completely drains through. It can become very compact. It can have mineral buildup. It can have issues with absorbing nutrients. There can be all sorts of problems with really old soil. So I always recommend a great refresh with the soil every couple of years, no matter what, even if you're using the same size pot. Now, with peperomia being, pretty sensitive plants, especially with their roots, I'm not going to disturb the root systems on these too much. We want it to focus on leaf growth, not on root repair. So what's the good type of pot for peperomia? So whatever type of pot you get, you want to make sure that it has really good drainage holes, because that's the best way to prevent root rot. You just want to make sure that any excess moisture is draining out. And soil is super important for peperomias. Terracotta is also a great option if you're somebody who likes to regularly water your plants, you're worried about root rot, you tend to overwater your plants, then go with terracotta because it will wick away that excess moisture. It's also great for cacti, snake plants, things like that. The other option is something like this. You could do like a nursery pot, something ceramic, something plastic. But if you do get one of these, just make sure, like I said, that it has a lot of really great drainage holes. And I like the clear ones because I can not only keep an eye on the roots, but I can see the moisture in the soil, which makes my life so much easier. I can also see if the plant is root bound. I can see if there's any pest issues in the roots. It's just really helpful. So I think I'm going to do this size. Again, I don't want to go much bigger. There's already room available still in the soil, and these plants enjoy being a little bit root bound. So I'm going to go just 1 inch larger on these. Peperomia are also a wonderful candidate for bottom watering, and this is where instead of watering from the top, you just take a bowl or something and fill it up with water, and then allow your peperomia to soak up water from the bottom of the plant. This allows for consistent watering, and it also prevents water from getting on the leaves of the plant, on the stem of the plant, which can cause some issues with peperomia. So I always recommend bottom watering, and that's also a great way to water a lot of our other plants. I'd say at least 30 minutes to an hour, just to make sure that it is in fact absorbing up moisture. All right, so now I have my pots picked out. My plants are ready to go. Again, I'm not going to be disturbing the root system too much on these because they hate that. And I'm going to talk about soil because I've learned through a lot of trial and a lot of error that soil is really the most important thing with plants. Everything else you can kind of experiment with and get a little bit wrong, but with soil, if you have the wrong type of soil that's going to retain too much moisture, your chances of root rot are very, very, very high because no matter how careful you are, you're just like always at a disadvantage. But if you have the right type of soil and really good soil specifically for your plant, then you can get the other stuff wrong. You can maybe get lighting a little bit wrong, you can get how much water you put a little bit wrong, but it's not going to be the end of the world like it would be if you had the incorrect type of soil. So I will say this, most potting mix that you're going to buy from the store is going to be way too dense for peperomia varieties. So we want a well-draining, airy soil mixture, similar to most of our aroids, similar to most of the epiphytic plants because these are semi-epiphytic. And you want to make sure that you have a well-draining soil mixture. So here's a great recipe for you that's really easy to make at home, and you could use this recipe for a lot of your tropical plants. You want to go with 40% high quality potting mix. This is going to retain the moisture that you need for your peperomia. Then you want to go like 60% other substrate. So orchid bark would be great for these plants. Maybe small pieces of orchid bark, chunky bark is great for them. You want to incorporate perlite or pumice, but you want it to be extremely well draining while still retaining moisture. You could also put some like worm castings in there to naturally fertilize the plant if you wanted to. But yeah, you just want it to be a really good, well-draining soil mixture. And you can also get like a customized soil blend, something that is great for like very, very well-draining tropical soil mixture. Now, if you are making your own soil, I'd recommend if you have one that has like very thick leaves to go a little bit more on the well draining. And if you have peperomia that have thinner leaves, then go with something that's a little bit less draining. But that's not necessary. You can make one batch and it's great for all peperomia. Peperomias hate compacted soil and they hate sitting in soil that's wet for too long. Both of those things are going to suffocate the roots of your plant and cause a lot of issues. Oh my gosh. Just saw the biggest, fattest pigeon, and he's watching the inflatable guy. Oh boy, I need to take a video of that. Nope. He's checking it all out. Oh, there he goes. Bye, guy. Here's an example of a really good soil blend that would be perfect for peperomia. You can see there's well-draining bits in there like perlite, pumice, there's like orchid bark, there's some activated charcoal, but then you also have really high quality, nice potting mix that's going to help retain moisture needed. Temperature and humidity is usually pretty standard for houseplants that I talk about, but that's not the case with Peperomia actually. They have some needs. So these are going to be split up into two categories, the thick leaf varieties and the thin leaf varieties. The thick leaf group are totally fine with average home humidity, and you don't need to mist them, it's unnecessary, and you do want to avoid hot drying air from vents. Then you have the thin leaf group, which is a more sensitive group, and they actually prefer moderate humidity, like 50 to 60%. The watermelon peperomia and the ruffle varieties will wilt in very, very dry air. And then like the string of turtles appreciates humidity, but only with excellent airflow. Otherwise, you're going to experience rot. Now the temperature is going to be the same as it is with most other tropical plants. If you're comfortable in your home, your plant will be comfortable in your home, so 65 on up is fine. Here's the thing, absolutely no cold drafts. Peperomias hate the cold drafts, so pull them away from a window, pull them away from the air vent. They don't want the hot drafts, they don't want the cold drafts, they're very sensitive to it. Also, if the soil is cold and wet, that's going to cause a lot of problems with the roots. So let's talk about fertilizing. These plants are light feeders. They don't need a ton of fertilizing. However, they will appreciate some fertilizing in the spring and summer during the growing months. So I'd recommend using a balanced, gentle houseplant fertilizer. And you can fertilize at half strength for peperomias if you want to. I wouldn't fertilize all the time because they can be prone to getting burnt with too much fertilizing. So here's some common issues that you'll find with peperomia and how to fix them. The first one is like mushy stem and leaf drop. This is usually from watering too often or the soil being too dense. So you want to make sure that your plant has a light, airy soil mixture like what we're talking about today. And you may also want to increase the light. Another thing with peperomia is curling leaves or cupped leaves. This can be from way too much light, or it can be from the soil being too dry. That's an easy fix. Just adjust your watering schedule and maybe pull back from the light a little bit. Another thing you might notice is that the variegation on your plant is fading. So an easy fix for this is to up your light. That's going to be the best way to promote the variegation. The other thing that you might struggle with are pests. This is very, very common with houseplants. So I always do like a pest care section, and I'll share what I do. But before I do want to mention that you see the little blooms on here. I trim them off because it's just taking energy from the plant that it doesn't need to be taking. And it's not like they're very beautiful blooms, they just are like stringy little things. So the two products I always recommend are systemic granules and also insecticidal soap. There are lots of different brands and all different types of these out there, these types of products, and I like to use them in unison and in conjunction together. This I spray on the leaves to get rid of the pests on the leaves, and this goes in the soil. It kills off anything in the soil, and then also the plant absorbs the active ingredient and it kills off the pests that absorb the active ingredient. This doesn't do spider mites, but it does everything else, and this one does do spider mites and everything else. Now with systemic granules, you don't want your pets to be munching on the plant after you use this product. So unfortunately, I don't have a bowl or anything in my plant room to water these right now, so I'm gonna have to go find something in a little bit. But I always water from the top after repotting. Always give your plant a good drink. The first time, again, watering from the top, allowing the plant to like settle in. And then for future, I will probably just bottom water these peperomias so that I don't get water on the leaves and that kind of thing. Peperomia are such great plants, and I hope this video was helpful. We have a very knowledgeable plant community, so please feel free to leave your tips and tricks for peperomia that you have found works for you. And know this, it's a journey with plant care, so don't be hard on yourself if you're struggling with your plants or if you're just trying things out. That's what I recommend doing, is seeing what works for you. And again, we all have different conditions in our homes, so it's just kind of like working with what you have and then adjusting as you can and seeing what works for your individual plants that you bring home. It's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be a journey, and you're not supposed to be getting everything right all the time. I'll say that, speaking from experience, we all get things wrong and we're all figuring it out. So don't be hard on yourself and have fun with it. Peperomia are great. And with them being like pet friendly plants with a ton of different varieties, I'm a huge fan of them. So if you want to see future planty videos, I post not just plant care, but also plant shopping and all good planty stuff. That's the only thing I post, so feel free to subscribe so they show up in your newsfeed. We also have a great community on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. All right, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and that I get to see you soon. Bye.